The Statue of Liberty sits on Liberty Island in New York Harbor, rising over 300 feet above the island. The whole statue sits upon a pedestal, and while the funding for the statue itself was raised by the French, the pedestal was funded and built by the American people. The site for the statue was selected because of the island's prominence in the harbor. The strategic position of the island still held the remnants of Fort Wood at the time, which was a defensive fort from the War of 1812. The 11-pointed base that sits underneath the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty is all that remains of Fort Wood and is now incorporated into the monument. The statue was conceived by French political thinker and prominent abolitionist Edouard de la Boulaye and designed by French sculptor Federic Bartholdi. The actual full name isn't the Statue of Liberty, it's Liberty Enlightening the World, or in French, La Liberté éclairant le monde. Personified as a woman, Liberty is represented in the sculpture as the Roman goddess of liberty, Libertas. Now, Libertas was associated with the freedom of slaves in the Roman pantheon. Her likeness had previously been represented in the statue designed by American sculptor Thomas Crawford, which was named Statue of Freedom. It was made in 1863 and placed atop the dome of the U.S. Capitol building. Now, the reason the Statue of Liberty was named Liberty Enlightening the World came from the deeply held conviction of La Boulaye that the Americans' fight for independence and the Union's victory in the Civil War, ending American slavery, represented the Enlightenment ideals he wanted to see borne out in his native country. His hope was to inspire a peaceful revolution in France and bring an end to the monarchy. Now, Bartholdi's design for the statue has a number of iconic features. At the very top, Lady Liberty holds a torch high. The torch is a symbol of the Enlightenment, lighting the way to freedom. On her head, she wears a crown of 7 rays. From the book Enlightening the World, The Creation of the Statue of Liberty, Yasmin Sabina Khan writes, more recently in France, the rayed crown had been used in images depicting liberty, truth, faith, and the Republic, notably the Republic of 1848. For a French sculptor of the 19th century, therefore, a crown of rays was a reasonable choice for the head covering of a statue. Democracy came in fits and starts in France. The Republic of 1848 was the Second Republic and was ended just 3 years later by Napoleon III. So the crown itself became another ray of light illuminating the sacred Enlightenment ideals and a hope for democracy. In her left arm is the Tablet of Law, which has the date of the American independence, the 4th of July, 1776, written on its face in Roman numerals. And finally, at the feet of the Statue of Liberty, we see the broken shackles and chains of the freed. The shackles at her feet do have a generalized meaning of freedom as already discussed in terms of enlightenment brought to the world, but it also more directly symbolizes the abolition of slavery. From the National Parks website, quote, "The Statue of Liberty would have never been conceived or built if its principal French and American advocates had not been active abolitionists who understood slavery as the cause of the Civil War and its end as the realization of the promise of liberty for all as codified in the Declaration of Independence." But it notes, but the Statue of Liberty was not intended entirely as a monument to the end of slavery. And looking at the meaning of the Statue of Liberty, you would be forgiven if thinking it is primarily a monument to immigration. That too is how I always understood and interpreted the monument. I would bet that's how most of us learn about the statue in school in the United States in the first place. As the National Parks website asserts in a report commissioned to better understand the meaning and history of the Statue of Liberty, quote, "The conventional interpretation of the statue as a monument to the American immigrant is a 20th century phenomenon. In its early years, 1871 to 1886, that view was only rarely and vaguely expressed. While references to the Civil War and abolition of slavery occur repeatedly from its first introduction to the United States in 1871, up to and including the dedication celebrations of 1886. Naturally, with any artwork, understandings and interpretations change over time. The excellent poem, The New Colossus, plays an outsized role in the changing of the understanding over time. Written by Emma Lazarus, the poem was commissioned as a part of a fundraising effort for the pedestal. And 14 years after her death, the poem was rediscovered, and after years of civic effort, in 1903, the poem was placed on the wall of the pedestal. This may sound familiar. It reads, "Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limb astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gate shall stand. A mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbors that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these the homeless tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Hearkening to the Colossus of Rhodes, a statue of the Greek sun god Helios, this new Colossus would be a beacon for those yearning to be free. This new Statue of Liberty possesses dual meanings, welcoming to the oppressed from afar and celebrating the breaking of chains domestically. These are certainly lofty ideals to be presented in the form of colossal sculpture, but for Bartholdi, that is precisely the point of the art form. In his 1885 recounting of the project, he writes, "The immensity of form should be filled with the immensity of thought, and the spectator, at the sight of the great proportions of the work, should be impressed before all things else with the greatness of the idea of which these ample forms are the envelope." And it would be with this meaning to convey and a completed design that the only thing Bartholdi had left to do was the execution. Enlisting Gustave Eiffel allowed for creative solutions in the process. Yes, that Gustave Eiffel of the tower. The statue would be built in Paris. Eiffel and his team would construct the metal truss framing on the inside, while Bartholdi and his team could get every detail of the thin sheets of copper correct. Once fully built in place in Paris, it was disassembled and shipped by the French government to New York to be assembled on site. Because of the pedestal that they were constructing the statue on top of, there was no way to build sufficient scaffolding to work from. So the workers were left to hang from ropes to assemble the statue. Once completed, the statue may have not looked entirely familiar to you, and that gets us to the New York Liberty's seafoam green color. When the statue was dedicated on October 28, 1886, it would have looked the copper color of a penny, and it was only over time a process called patination would give the statue its iconic color. The process of patination is a chemical change called a patina on the surface of the copper that protects the inner copper layer from corrosion. It happens in 3 visible stages. The Statue of Liberty would have started off bright copper, and it would have become a brownish black color. Finally, over time, that would have become the seafoam green that we see today. The growth of the patina on the statue was delayed initially due to the sulfur levels in the New York Harbor atmosphere at the time, taking in total around 20 years to achieve the full color change. Today, that change would take closer to 8 years. The dedication ceremony on October 28, 1886 is marked with one final irony. As the ceremony took place, only 2 women were allowed on the island with Lady Liberty. An irony not missed by the suffragettes at the time, who, not endowed with the same rights to vote as the men on the island, quote, responded by chartering their own boat. It cruised as close to the island as it could get during the ceremonies, and the group's leaders could be heard speaking out in praise of the embodiment of liberty as a woman, and of course in favor of votes for women. As noted by the National Parks website, Reconstruction-era civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois felt the activists, quote, were reluctant to embrace the symbol of a nation which would not fully include them as citizens. The Statue of Liberty did not help them to gain equality and justice in the truest sense. It was only the beginning. Ultimately, what was viewed as the achievement of freedom for Laboulaye and Bartholdi, for many people at the time of the construction of the Statue of Liberty, specifically for women and African Americans, this celebration of progress did not mark the end of the fight for liberty, but a new beginning. As the dedication ceremony was happening, festivities moved down the main roads of New York City in celebration. As the celebration made its way down Wall Street, quote, young men at the stock exchange, which unlike the produce exchange had not closed for the day, leaned out the windows and began to unreel spools of ticker tape, letting them drift into the crowds below. More and more tape filled the air as the enthusiastic youths were joined by their elders, and the celebratory effect was such that the tradition of the ticker tape parade was established that day. The ticker tape parade may have been an unlikely American tradition to have been born out of a gift from French abolitionists celebrating the ending of American slavery, but it has become as American as apple pie. We do it for astronauts returning back from successful missions. We throw them for visiting dignitaries. And of course, we throw them when we win things. Which brings us to the New York Liberty. As I talked about in my video about WNBA team names, they get their name and color scheme both from the Statue of Liberty. And they have played in 5 WNBA championships, most recently last season. Unfortunately, they have yet to win a single championship. Now, will the New York Liberty ever get the chance to walk the same streets celebrated with a ticker tape parade like their namesake? Only time can tell. And with that full circle transition back, I want to thank you for going on this journey with me. If I could, I'd love to leave you with one thought that I kept returning to when making this video. I hope this video inspires you to use your voice to continue the work in progress that is never finished. Like W.E.B. Du Bois said of the Statue of Liberty, you should think of every step of progress that we make as a nation as a new beginning, because the work of democracy never ends. Du Bois was born shortly after the Civil War and died a few years before the Voting Rights Act. He spent his entire life advocating for an equality that was never given him. But because of his work and others like him, progress eventually came. The long work of progress isn't about overnight change, but consistent and meaningful steps in the right direction. So as we reflect on one of our most iconic national symbols, let's reflect on the steps that we each take in our own lives. Steps that approach our fellow Americans with the curiosity and dignity that we all deserve. Let's work together to continue to build a future that deserves as beautiful of a colossus as the Statue of Liberty enlightening the world. Thanks for learning something with me.